All right, Jason Longshore, and I really appreciate you taking time out here to talk to us about the game coming up, the very important game, the UPSL Georgia playoff final. Atlanta United is traveling up to Dalton Stadium to play Dalton United FC, and pretty much a contrast in styles. But before we get into that game, I wanted to ask you about, particularly with your relationship with Atlanta United, with the academy. The regular season, they've had a lot of success. They lifted the trophy last season. They were 1 point away from lifting it this season for the regular season. And this, there's been some showing of change over from last season with Coach Jose Silva being replaced. Now he's gone on to a higher level of coaching,
Yeah.
and now Ricky Davey has come in with the academy, the U19s. What's your take on the Atlanta United Academy U19s team this season?
I think when you just look at the week that Atlanta United's academy is having across all of the different levels, this is a part of a bigger picture. And when you look at the U16s who are going to a national championship game this weekend as well, you look at the 19s and their progression, you look at Atlanta United 2 and they're playing MLS Next Pro, and Jose Silva is a big part of that coaching staff now after getting, his experience in UPSL. And you look at the first team this week with Nick Firmino, with Luke Brennan making their MLS debuts. Firmino from Atlanta United 2 gets the equalizer late with just an incredible moment at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. But Luke Brennan is the kind of player who comes through Atlanta United's academy. He was there in the first U12 group. He's been a lifer in the academy. And this team with the U19s, that it's primarily U19, not exclusively, these are guys who have come through the academy. These are guys who understand what it means to be an Atlanta United player, and they're all trying to get to Mercedes-Benz Stadium. And Ricky Davies' progression is part of that. Jose Silva's progression from this group is part of that. It's all about getting to the highest level that you possibly can representing this club. So it's been a really cool journey this year to see new faces with this team in UPSL, some familiar faces coming back to the group as well, and seeing somebody like Ricky and his growth as a coach. I've known Ricky since he was in charge of the Georgia Revolution, and making the move to the Atlanta United Academy, rising up the age groups and getting the opportunity with this team and having them on the cusp of a league championship. Just so cool to see. And that's the story, I think, of this team and this fit in UPSL. Is this is a spot where guys are going to be able to get through the academy age groups, play here. Some of them are going to go on to college and have great careers. Grant Howard, somebody who I thought had a great run in UPSL at Virginia Tech as a freshman this past season, had a really good first season there. Guys who are with this team now, and Justin McLean and Evan Schroeder from Georgia State University, who have come through the academy. It's a spot where players are going to continue to develop either on their way up, or an opportunity for players to get noticed again by the club and potentially sign those homegrown deals coming out of college at the end of a college run, like we've seen Macho Chol do coming back from Wake Forest. So it's development, but at this stage of the year, it's about winning and winning trophies, and winning is part of that development. So the balancing act that Ricky Davey has done this season in developing players, but also winning games and getting them to this point, it's been a really cool thing to see.
Yeah, I mean that's been a really impressive thing that I've watched, intently, especially after Jose Silva had been so successful last season. Ricky Davey coming in, and there is a question mark. And he's been successful with the younger academy before then. Like you say, he was at Georgia Revolution, but you wonder, okay, now he's going up to an older and more experienced level. Players that are more developed, can he carry that on? And I think the answer is yes, as he's won the division for the first time for Atlanta United. Jose Silva came close last season, but he did get to the playoffs, where LGSA went on to the Nationals, with the playoff final. Now they've gone a step further by winning the division, and now they're a one step away from the national playoffs. I mean, how difficult is it for a new coach like Ricky Davey to come in with changing players that are going to happen every season? A lot, like as you mentioned, many of these players are going to go off to college. in the fall, and so he's going to have to turn that over again. What kind of challenge does that give a coach like Ricky David with his quality? Can he adapt to that level here and the things that are happening here?
I think getting the experience with the younger age groups in the Atlanta United Academy really helps him because teams aren't static when it comes to a professional academy. Players are going to move up and down depending on their level, and they're going to continue to get tested. You want players to fail in some ways. You want them to move up, maybe an age group or maybe two age groups further than their age allows them to go, and they get tested, and maybe they need to come back then. So the player movement is always the challenge because your lineup is going to be in flux, whether this is Atlanta United 2 or all the way down to that U14 team that Ricky Davey started with in the Atlanta United Academy. Players are going to get called up. Players are going to be unavailable at times, and you've got to make it work with who you have. This group's really unique because you have a number of players who have come through the academy, are preparing to go off to college in the fall, and they want to end their first run with the academy because so many come back and either play for the twos or come back in the summer to train and play with this team again. They want to end their first run with the academy on a high note. So you have a lot of motivated players, but you've already lost some players who have been part of this team over the season. Remy Okunlola is a prime example. Okunlola has done really well in UPSL. He went on and played in high school in the spring and was the Georgia High School Player of the Year at Brookwood, and then came back into Atlanta United 2's group where he hadn't really factored in as much. And he started 3 games in a row and been an absolute revelation. And his time with UPSL is a big part of that. So the movement of players is the hardest thing. And I think it's unique in the UPSL Georgia division because you don't have as many clubs with as many moving parts as Atlanta United does. But it's a credit to the coaches. And Jose Silva set the foundation with the UPSL side. And now Davey is building on it. This is a spot to learn, to grow, to get tested, and ultimately to learn how to win these games and do it against top competition. And I think we've seen Ricky rise to that challenge that Jose set by starting this group off.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you saw Jose. He won a Manager of the Season award in the process. Really, set the standard. I had this discussion with Coach Davey that they really are setting the standard for the rest of the league because of the organization being associated with a professional club like Atlanta United. And so that's been a good thing, not only for Atlanta United and the players there, but also for the other teams that are competing to get to that same level. So, and so, going back a little bit to the LGSA game from last season and in the playoff final, they did best Atlanta United to get on. But do you think that those players that are involved in the organization in general have learned from that setback and can apply it in this final today?
Yeah, look, I think it's the balancing act because, you're not picking players across all of your teams purely for this game in UPSL. You do have to think about the players' overall development. You also have to think about the club's overall development because it's a busy weekend. There's players that are away with the U16s right now who on a normal weekend might play in this game, and they're with the U16s trying to win a national championship. There's guys who might play in this game that are with Atlanta United too, as they prepare to play this weekend. And like I mentioned with somebody like Luke Brennan, a year or so ago, Luke Brennan might have factored into this game. Well, he's going to be with Atlanta United potentially at Red Bull Arena tonight. So that's the challenge of this. I think what Atlanta United has to do across the board, whatever team we're talking about, in whatever competition we're talking about, you have to learn how to get the job done under pressure and still play your game because there is a definite identity that Atlanta United is trying to establish. And we want the ball. We want to win the ball back quickly if we lose it. We want to play on the front foot. We want to get numbers forward. We're going to challenge our defenders to defend in 1v1 situations quite often. We're not going to create a safety net for them. You're going to have to defend in those moments because we want to score goals and get numbers forward. And that identity and that style of play is consistent from a U12 team all the way through the first team. So whoever steps in and puts on that jersey in this game, you have to do two things. You have to play the Atlanta United way, and you also have to find ways to win in that tool, in that setup. So that's where you are. And this team tonight will be really challenged to do that against top competition in Dalton. These are guys who have been around one of the top high school soccer areas in the country in Dalton with multiple state championships. So many players who have won some of those state championships, so they know how to win in these moments. And they're going to be a little maybe more experienced in some of these moments than the Atlanta United side. But the Atlanta players have to rise to the standard of this championship, but also do it as an Atlanta United team and play in that manner and think about the big picture, like I said, about progressing through the club and potentially, earning your way into the first team at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. So there's a lot of different things you have to balance for Atlanta United in a game like this, but also in a league like this.
Yeah, a lot of learning to do for these players, but a lot of incentives that you mentioned. That there's a lot of things that they can look forward to that gives them an incentive to reach that extra gear to perform on the field of play, especially on a final like today, where a lot of eyes are going to be on there, a lot of coaches going to be looking on, and so that is interesting. But just to contrast that, you brought up Dalton United. First of all, I mean, you mentioned, and I had this discussion with Coach Davey in that yes, they're new to the UPSL. They've come in, they've won Division One last season, they've won the Premier Division regular season title this season, pipping United just by a single point on the final day. But the success of Dalton United, is that a surprise or no? I mean, it seems like you understand from their history that this is not really a surprise.
No, you have such a huge local player pool to draw from there with guys who, play in the local leagues in Dalton, guys who have won state championships at the high school level. I mean, Dalton just won their seventh this year. Southeast won last year. Northwest Whitfield was in the championship game last year. Christian Heritage won a title this year at 2A. The Dalton Academy won last year. All of those quality, Cahulla Creek 3A, they won a state championship this year. All of them have quality players, and all of them are going to progress forward and potentially play for Dalton United. And I know there's multiple teams from the area now. So you're going to create another hotbed for UPSL soccer in the state of Georgia, in Dalton. And this success isn't a surprise, just knowing the talent level there. It's all about how you bring it together, how you pick the right players to fit the way that this team can play, and how you compete. And I think when you get into these kinds of games, these high stakes games, that's what these players are accustomed to. The expectation, whether you're at Dalton or Southeast Whitfield or Northwest or any of the other schools, is to win. So you have that dichotomy in this game of a team like Dalton, who it's about winning and it's about winning trophies and winning medals, and Atlanta United, where it's a developmental team and you have a team that wants to win, obviously, but is from a much bigger picture looking at developing talent and developing for the future. So it's a really interesting matchup in that regard. Two very talented groups of players, different ways of approaching games and different levels of experience in these types of situations, which should make for a great final.
Yeah, I mean, there seems to be such a contrast in the two clubs. I mean, it's if you had to describe it as the irresistible force against the immovable object, and it's going to be quite an encounter to witness. And ASMG, of course, is going to be there to show the game. Unfortunately, we won't have you as a commentator. You're going to be busy with the Atlanta United side.
I will be at Red Bull Arena, unfortunately.
Yep. Yeah, a lot of football out there, but for sure, we're looking forward to presenting this game as something else. And I can't really separate the two. I mean, there's so many different ways to look at it. They tied 2-2 in their previous meeting in the season. North Georgia and Atlanta United. And that's one thing I wanted to bring up about that first encounter, because Atlanta United went down to 10 men in the first half, and they were down 2-1. Down 1-0, I believe. And they came back to lead 2-1. And so deep in stoppage time is when North Georgia converted a free kick, which it like in the final kick of the game, which gave them the draw. And so I would imagine that that's going to be something, and even Coach Davey mentioned it. That's something they got to correct.
Yeah.
That's a motivating force in this game to correct that and come out ahead the next time, because they showed a lot of heart by coming back from 1-0 down, 10 men to lead, almost closed out the game with all 3 points, and then had that last goal conversion go in for the 2-2 draw. And so I imagine that that's on the mind of a lot of people. I'm sure that's been a sticking point all season, and now they get a chance to do something about it. But so let me put you on the spot. Who's going
Okay.
to win, and what's going to be the score?
Well, I'm a little biased, obviously. I think having that happen earlier in the season is a good thing for the Atlanta United side, and I know the players might be a little bit different in this one as well.
Yeah,
But it's going to be a talking point, and it's honestly a talking point, I think, for any team that is ball dominant like Atlanta United is. You're going to have a lot of the ball. You're going to play your game, but there's moments in the game where you have to protect what you have, and you have to throw your body in front of a cross. You have to, block a shot. You have to do those kind of dirty, gritty things to get the job done in those moments. And that's been a talking point across the Atlanta United teams at all levels this season, especially when you get into these kinds of moments. So I think having that learning lesson from earlier in the year will help. I think it'll be a really hard fought game. I think one thing I've seen across UPSL this season has been a good number of goals. I think the attacks are maybe a little bit ahead of the defenses in these games, and teams are going to take risks as well. And Atlanta obviously will play very on the front foot. That's the way that they play typically. So I think there's going to be goals in it. I think it's going to be a fun one, but I think Atlanta finds a way to get it done this time, 3-2.
all right, there we have it, 3-2. That's the prediction. So, but yeah, it should be a fantastic game, and regardless of who wins and goes on, I think even the national bracket is going to be very interesting for the
Yeah.
Georgia, whichever Georgia team goes on, and then it'll be interesting to see how they match up against national talent across the whole United States. So, uh, Jason, I want to thank you for taking time out to give your thoughts on the game and the two teams. And we look forward to not only talking to you again in this setting, but having you as part of the broadcast team as we get into maybe some regional cup games and into the fall season.
Looking forward to it. Thanks for having me.
All right, take care.